We've been talking a lot about men's reading and how books don't cater towards men anymore in the fiction publishing industry. This has been a epidemic that's happened over 20 plus years. Women took over the publishing industry in the early 2000s. They pretended they didn't. They keep on going, we need more women in science fiction and fantasy. I actually did an analysis in 2017 on the top fantasy and science fiction markets for short fiction, and sure enough, there were more women published at the time than there were men. Very simple. It was close, but it was 50-50 at the time. Now it's much higher than that. And what the publishers and the editors told me at the time was that the submissions they got from men was about 20 times what they got from women. So men actually were vying for less slots than women at a rate of like 20-1. For what would get published because they were trying to publish women at a higher rate. Now, this is crazy because, of course, the publishing industry already skews 80% women. So they just wanted to take these men's fiction genres and just completely destroy them because they don't want men to have men-only spaces is what it comes down to. This is the whole agenda of modern feminists at this point. Now, Louis L'Amour's son gave a great interview with the No Nonsense editor. The No Nonsense editor is a wonderful YouTube channel, which I like watching, actually, quite a bit. So if you do watch this video, I appreciate you and what you do over there. And she gave this epic interview, which was very, very long, which I distilled for people this morning, where he says he's been informed multiple times that men don't read, despite the fact that Louis L'Amour is one of the most read authors of all times. If you don't know who he is, because they don't talk about him anymore, he basically was the Western genre. This guy sells millions and millions, even to this day still sells millions and millions of books. I have a bunch of those like leatherette books. If you're a reader and a fan, he has this whole collection of leatherette books of all these like of his old westerns that look really, really pretty on a shelf. Let me know if you have some of those. Now, this right here is testament that there are male readers and men want to read this stuff. However, what happens? They just don't put it on bookshelves. And so when you don't put it on bookshelves, you have a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So men go into a bookstore, there's nothing to read, they go out not buying books. They go elsewhere. This all happens. These still sell. Louis L'Amour's son said they're still selling. So what happened exactly? Well, he gave his take of watching it over the years, which is very, very interesting from a historical perspective, which we'll get into. Please hit the like and subscribe button, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. I wrote some great men's fiction called The Demon's Eye, which just came out on Amazon, which I'd love for you to check out. This is classic sword and sorcery at its finest. I wrote this. I tried to study a bunch of classic fantasy fiction. I read a bunch of the stuff from the original Dungeons & Dragons Appendix N, which was their recommendations for what inspired that game back in the late 70s. And they had so many wonderful authors in there, including Paul Anderson, C.L. Moore, and more. And so I went and I tried to write a book in that style. And so if you like that, if you miss the classic style of things, this is a great place to start with my reading. I've got 20 plus books, so it's a good place to be a fan as well because I write very regularly and very prolifically. Check it out. It's in the description below. Really appreciate you for being here. There's a great spot to read. And again, this had a huge hit overnight. I think it's because Clownfish TV was talking about this men's fiction deal and referenced us. So shout out to Clownfish TV for talking about this. And grab this today, guys. Support some great fiction. Support our channel. It's only $4.99. Thanks so much. All right, so Louis L'Amour was known as America's favorite storyteller, the definitive Western genre writer. Now his son tackles the question as to what happened in men's fiction in the last few decades. So he actually has been told this. He says, I can't tell you how many times in the last 2 decades I have been informed men don't read. That's by people in publishing, people I work with, people who know my business is still selling male-oriented fiction and is year on year among the top 50 authors in the world. Everybody wants this because he puts badass action into books. This is excellent stuff right here that everybody wants. What a great cover, too. I love these style of covers. Anyway, he sees the golden age of fiction of pulp magazines, a point where the industry was most geared towards men. This is right after World War II. The way that that it worked at the time is most fiction was done in magazines and short stories that were published on the stands. So people would buy them on the train to work, etc., read them on the way back, etc., and this is how they'd kind of unwind for a little bit. They'd get these short pops of stories. There was lots of stuff out there. There were westerns, a lot of military fighter jet fiction was very popular, science fiction and fantasy, of course, among men. And of course, crime and mystery as well was a huge one that was out there too. Now there were women's stuff as well, and most of it geared towards romance. Even some of the Western stuff had like a cowboy romance setup, which a lot of people loved. Now what happened is in the 60s and 70s, people started migrating towards bookstores, and the bookstore model started to get much bigger. And at that point, all this stuff was mixed in. You'd have a mixture of all of this stuff from all these publishers. And because of bookstore reading, they wanted to have targeted readership for categories so that somebody could go into a section of bookstore and find exactly what they wanted. That's when genre became a lot more limited. That's when people started searching for just specific stuff. It's really interesting in my reading because you'd think I write science fiction and fantasy, and you can see I've got a bunch of different stuff. I've got a YA steampunk here, which is kind of Dungeons and Dragons oriented, but it's young adult, right? And that's actually my bestseller for whatever reason. And then I've got military science fiction here, which is very poignant. You can see the laser sword and the badass armor right here. Then I've got space opera science fiction based on starship stuff. Now, and of course I've got hard fantasy as well. So you look at all this and you say, well, these are all the same thing. People would like this. It's not the case. People who read this kind of fantasy don't read this kind of science fiction, and vice versa. So when I get an audience for this, oftentimes they won't come in for this because they feel like it's a different genre. That sort of subgenre thing came from this whole bookstore sort of mentality that really segmented people into very specific things. And I think it limits genre because you could do a lot. There's a lot of potential for different crossover. Actually added some science fiction elements to the Demon's Eye, which I'll leave for you to find when you read it. But with that, it makes it a lot harder for you to experiment as an author outside of genre. I could talk about that for hours, but this is exactly how it happened. When this all got segmented, that's when things started to change. Now, he mentions that women were getting published anyway because, of course, like businessmen understood that women read books too, and so they didn't have a problem with things whatsoever. And so he noticed things change. He says, I saw two changes, one in product, another in personnel, which occurred around 2010. Started in the 90s, there was a myth going around the business that fewer people read. The remaining customers, so the story went, were very dedicated, so the goal was to sell them upscale, attractive, somewhat more expensive books to make up the difference. More hardcovers at a higher price point. Now, I love hardcovers. I love leather-bound books. They got me on that stuff. Now, this had an effect of edging genre fiction slowly out of the market and replacing it with general fiction or literature. As the myth compounded, the narrative shifted to men don't read. He says now the story became men don't read, very similar to the myth that readership was dropping off. I'm sure that both of these things are true to a certain extent, and it was also true that that being a female helps sell books. Now, this is contrary to what they always said. They always said that being a female made it difficult in the publishing industry. Nobody wanted a female writer. Nobody wants a female blah, blah. It's completely a lie. They've been trying to push women into this forever and ever. And even in the early 2000s, like I said, the makeup of the publishing industry was 80% female. It was just in these subgenres where it was even 50-50 at that point. If you look at all of the people that got pushed in those early 2000s, even late 90s, even in military science fiction and the like, you have Lois McMaster-Bujold, you have Elizabeth Moon, you have a female military science fiction sort of group that was getting more attention from the media than their male counterparts because, man publishing this stuff, that's normal. That's not even worth the news. And so these guys got edged out all the way around in, of course, even genres dedicated towards men. It's very, very weird stuff. And so they just basically said that eventually men were not wanted as readers. And so as they made this self-fulfilling prophecy, the men just tuned out. Now, he said, I suspect that while fewer people read, the problem is not as big as mainstream publishing makes it out to be. And this is what he says. I wonder if fewer men read or if they have migrated to finding indies on KDP. They have. That's exactly where it is. Men just don't go to the bookstores because if you go to a bookstore, we covered it over the weekend, all you find is this chick lit romantic-y stuff, not like anything that men actually want to read with adventure fiction. Men want adventure fiction, period, no matter what the genre is. And so that doesn't exist in bookstores. And so they do just go online. I know lots of people making huge livings off of men's fiction, including myself, and it always works. And so this is the thing where they just have missed the mark, and because they don't carry it, It's just gone somewhere else because people want to get their reading. They want to get their fix anyway. They just don't want to go to a bookstore where they're not going to find anything. It's pretty obvious at that point. And so this is pretty interesting stuff that he said right here. He said when traditional publishers mostly ignore people like him and myself, I think it's very weird. I get no offers from traditional publishing, and we're selling thousands of books a month. Like, very, very weird. But hey, I don't care. Here's the thing. When you do it indie as an author, it's better anyway because I sell thousands of books a month. If a publisher picked me up and I went into a bookstores, I'd still probably sell about the same amount. But what I'd get is I'd have to have an agent to get there. The agent takes 25% off the top. Then the publisher takes 50%. So you're getting at that point, 25% of your sales. My stuff where I'd make $3 a book right now, which is about what I make off of an Amazon sale, I'd be making pennies a book by the time it actually went to a publisher. So it doesn't make any sense to do so. You can connect with people on the internet. Marketing doesn't make sense. Being in bookstores doesn't help. And so it doesn't work. Really, really silly. But this is why they ignore people like Louis L'Amour's son as well. He says, I think that they think we're special. To a certain extent, we are. Dad's books are handed down from generation to generation. They can learn a lot about what they might do from our history, but it's also true that publishers publish. They don't write. They can only discover a writer. They can't create one, he says. And then he says, what do you got to do? Here's how it's got to be for the future. You have to get to boys. My sister says if you don't get a boy between 10 and 13, you don't get them at all. Unfortunately, the marketplace for this age for kids is fractured. Each segment kind of turns into a silo. Each age range is sort of an island into itself without much overlap. Yeah, these things don't age up well. This is kind of why Harry Potter worked very well, because they did gear towards that. J.K. Rowling geared towards that demographic. And even though a lot of girls read that as well, it was definitely a boys' adventure fiction if you think about it. And Harry Potter aged up as the books went along. And as those books went along and aged up, they got more complicated, they got darker, and it just kept and maintained that audience that was growing up with it as it went along. I think that's a big part of why it worked. And so that's interesting. He also has this advice for authors. Men need you. Boys need you. I fear a future where the imaginations of our young have been robbed of the practice they're given with fiction, with decoding the alphabet into amazing stories and entertaining educational experiences that we can no longer invent. It's not just stories, but clocks, microwave ovens, innovative software. And he thinks it all starts here. I agree with him 100%. Interesting analysis on why men are allegedly not reading, and I think they are, and I know that they are. Interesting on how the genre fiction kind of contributed towards that by creating silos, like he said. And that's the deal. Got to get out of the silo a little bit and just kind of realize that there's a broader market out there and make everything as broad as possible. Hopefully we've done so here. Check out the Demon's Eye. It's in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video. What do you think about this? Leave a comment down below and hit the like and subscribe button. We'll be back soon.